All right, let's go straight into our week one recap. We've got a little game that we are going to call basically big takeaway, overreaction, and then not worried about it. We each came up with one answer for those three categories. So let's start, Dave, with your biggest takeaway from week one. What do you got?
I mean, until Sunday Night Football, who had Jets Steelers as the biggest game of the week? I mean, this was an excellent game. You had the narrative, Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields facing off from the teams they played for last year. They both delivered like across the board. Rodgers with 4 touchdowns, Justin Fields with a mix of passing and rushing. Week one's tough. You know, you're trying to pull a lot of info from preseason. Like, do these 9 carries for 30 yards mean anything? Does this guy getting targeted twice mean much? So, you know, it can be tough, but we leaned on the model for this game with our best bet of the week, Jets plus 2.5, and it was a cash. So, yeah, Jets, big takeaway.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers dialing back the clock in that game as well. And I think how we got the plus 2.5 thanks to the model, because moneyline bettors might have felt a little bit differently based on how that game ended. But Aaron Glenn, my old Lions coordinator with his Jets debut, he antagonized Aaron Rodgers all offseason, said, "You're not our guy." And Aaron was speaking at the podium after this game about how it meant a lot to him to take down everybody in the Jets. So I'm with you. A lot of entertaining games in week one, but not the sexiest matchup on paper. Became pretty damn sexy at the end of that game. My biggest takeaway, I just want to give some love to, I think, the two best teams in the NFL. It is the Ravens and the Bills. And you alluded to it, and you're right up there about how until Sunday Night Football, it was the Jets game that was the story, because Sunday Night Football was pretty incredible. I think football fans, fantasy football players, bettors alike, were all locked in on this for various reasons. And look, my eye test says these two teams are in a tier of their own this year. I watched everything I could from week one of NFL. I did not see any teams that caliber-wise could approach how those two offenses were functioning. It shouldn't be a surprise. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen have been great for years. We know this, but it does feel like we've sort of hit this wall where every year we call them contenders, and then every year, for whatever reason, they don't break through. And it's still the Mahomes story in the AFC, and it's still the Eagles in the NFC and other teams. To me, this year, I feel like these teams are continuing to take incremental steps forward, whereas we have big questions with some of their biggest contenders. The Chiefs have almost certainly taken a step back right now. The Bengals looked iffy at best, sneaking by the Browns, and Joe Burrow had a very quiet debut this year. The Lions have questions on both sides of the field right now. So I think this is just one of those things for me. You know, when we did the season preview episode, the model told us that the Ravens and Bills are the two most likely outcomes here to win the Super Bowl. There may be bigger value depending on what odds you can get with other teams, but they were kind of in a tier of their own. And I think that was backed up hugely by the eye test in week one.
Yeah. I think at least 5% higher for the Ravens than the Eagles. The Bills were right behind them in the model. That had all the makings of an AFC championship right there.
Yep, crazy. And drama at the end, too, as Josh Allen was able to get his comeback victory. All right, biggest overreaction from week one. What do you got?
The more I was thinking about this, I don't know if this is even an overreaction or just the truth, but the Dolphins might be playing for the number 1 pick already. Tua did not look good. Tyreek Hill was already complaining. They got absolutely blown out. Lucky to escape with points at all. I think A-Chain scored in the 4th. Maybe it was earlier. I don't know. Of course, the Colts had the do it for Jimmer say power. You know, you have to give them hats off to absolutely throwing off the doors in week one. But the Dolphins look like last place in the AFC East might be their ceiling. And I'm very curious to see what the updated futures probabilities on Dimers have once those are in the book, probably later today or early Wednesday morning.
Yeah, I talked about how I feel like there is a lot of parity in the league right now, maybe outside of that tier of the top 2. But to me, the parity also extends down to the bottom teams in the league. I don't think there are many franchises coming into this season in tank mode. And that's rare. Like, go throughout NFL history, almost every single year, there's 3 or 4 teams that, you know, coming into a season wouldn't mind being bad and have their eyes on a certain quarterback of choice. I think this draft next season is going to be weird because I don't think there is a consensus, obvious number one franchise changing guy. And how teams handle the NFL season in response to that is going to be fascinating. I think you're right. The Dolphins look like the one team that may be on blow it up watch. And there's a lot of unhappy looking body language in that huddle right now. I'm going to get personal with my emotional overreaction here, as I am wont to do, but I am seriously worried the Detroit Lions are cooked. I mean, this was a team that has felt like they were just cracking into a quote unquote championship window. I spent the first 30 years of my life just not knowing anything but misery in terms of rooting for my NFL team. These last 2 years have been special. I think they've been Super Bowl appearance good before you get to the postseason, and had some, obviously frustrations and failures, but they lost both coordinators. We knew this. Last year was special in part because Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn decided to return to Detroit and turn down head coaching opportunities. That was never going to last forever. And I think, the Bears came out, touchdown on their first drive with Ben Johnson's scripted drive. They looked unstoppable. They hit some walls later that they're going to have to work through. But I still think that offense is going to be really good. You watch the Lions in that Packers game, man. This offensive line was a disaster, just missing A-gap blocks the entire night. The run game looked different. Jared Goff looked uncomfortable. So I am full steam ahead on wanting more data points from my Lions. They're playing Ben Johnson and the Bears in week 2. And I'd be lying to you if I said I was confident that the Lions were going to bounce back offensively.
Yeah, you could feel Ben Johnson's presence, the addition on the Bears and the absence with the Lions, twofold. Yeah. And yeah, like you said, it fell flat in the second half, but there's going to be some growing pains. Yeah, not what you want to see for Detroit.
Yeah, 100%. All right, from one overreaction to one thing you're not worried about that maybe the masses are trying to tell you to be concerned about. What do you got?
This one's a little personal for us as a whole. A.J. Brown nuked our Thursday Night Football same game parlay with a singular target, I think, in the final 2 minutes of the game on the Eagles' last drive. I'm not going to read too much into that. The Cowboys did have their healthiest secondary they've had in probably 3 years. Trayvon Diggs and Bland, both healthy. I haven't watched the tape. I'm not a big tape watcher, so I don't know if Trayvon Diggs locked down A.J. Brown or they didn't run all over the Cowboys, so it wasn't a matter of they didn't need to pass. But I'm not worried about it unless it happens again. He's A.J. Brown. He's an alpha, 1,000+ yards in both seasons with the Eagles. Talk to me next week.
Yeah, it just felt random, which there were a bunch of superstar receivers I felt like that had random misutilized performances in week 1. Even Justin Jefferson, he ended up with 44 yards and a touchdown late. So I'm with you. I'm standing by our superstar receivers early. For my not worried about it this week, I'm going to go back to the Bengals, who I mentioned looked iffy against the Cleveland Browns in week 1. They did. Absolutely concerning performance. However, I still think Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to be fine. It's actually one of those things. I saw a tweet about this. Apparently, Joe Burrow was like 1-9 in weeks 1 and 2 coming in to this game this year. And I think escaping with a win is actually a pretty good outcome for Joe Burrow. He's a guy who we've seen get his feet underneath him later on in the seasons in the past. And to me, I think from a fantasy perspective or even just a betting player props perspective, you're going to still have some opportunity with Chase bouncing back, even though it was a quiet performance. T. Higgins only had 3 catches as well, partially because I thought the Bengals' run game didn't look all that good. I think they're going to have to lean further on Joe Burrow through the air than even they've wanted to in the past if Chase Brown is supposed to be a bell cow this year. It was a weird game script game down the stretch. They were just trying to survive. I would expect a big bounce back performance from Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in week 2 and beyond.